For my observational drawing work, we started off by doing a load of experimental drawings and sketches. We started off by looking at natural form and pine cones and that kind of thing. And then obviously we looked into different artists that use experimental techniques. As a class, we did a project that moved around the classroom and everyone added to the image at the end of the lesson. We then took different skills such as photocopying, combining the work together to make a repeated pattern. Then worked into chalk and charcoal and found artists that also did experimental and quirky techniques. From that, we moved on to still life and reflective drawing. I found that really interesting as it was a bit more quirky and the technique was a bit more difficult. Then we moved into long time observational drawings and still lives. I worked on popcorn for that. From there I moved on to movement. I found that really interesting as you could only capture a small part of the image within the short frame of time. We worked on a variety of different objects. I really liked the cheetah that I did as I felt that you could really see it leaping. We then moved on to still life and life drawing. When looking at this, it looked like the man was a massive crowd, and it was really interesting as you could really capture some different identities throughout that. We then worked on more different techniques and artist work. I looked into doing coffee drawing as I felt that was really interesting and you could really capture different tones and shades. Then we looked into the work of Picasso and Matisse. I found that really interesting as they do very quick sketches, so it was more experimental in the style. Then we moved on to our independent work. I decided to focus on organic forms as I felt that I had most work to do with that and I could relate most to that. So to start with, I did some experimental pages where I just took my own photos and primary research. I felt that this was quite good as I was able to get some very good quick sketches off of it. Then I looked into different artists that use experimental techniques as I wanted to do an experimental piece of work as my final piece. From there I decided on one of my main themes, and that was the mushroom study. I felt that this was really interesting as I could get a very wide variety of marks made with a fine liner and pen. I then decided to further my second final piece into the study of flowers, so I looked at the botanical studies and worked from my own photos in different styles. For my third piece of work, I wanted to look at skulls as I had a lot of photos of them from my father's house. I felt that this was really interesting as I was able to get some very good images of rams, and the experimental drawings that I did were really intriguing and you could really get some detail in there. From this, I decided on what I wanted my final piece to look like. So I did another experimental drawing to test on what that would be. However, I decided that I wanted to do a detailed final piece for one of them. This is my first final piece. It is the side view of a ram's head. I felt that this was really interesting because I was able to get some really great depth into it, and I decided to work on wood as that would give a variation of materials into the final project. From there I moved on to my second final piece, which was my mushroom study. I thought that this was really interesting as I tried it on different backgrounds, however obviously I decided that it would work best on just the plain and simple first design where it was on brown paper with black biro and fine liner and white gel tip pen. I felt this was really interesting as I was able to get some really good depth into the centre of the mushroom, and it ended up getting some really good designs. Moving on to my third final piece, I decided to do the botanical study of flowers. I obviously did a page of my own work and I decided on doing this really simple line drawing work. So for my final piece, I did a layered photocopied acetate work where I did a coffee painting underneath it. I felt this was really interesting as it created depth within the image just from simple drawing of the outline of flowers. Obviously, then at the end of it, I have my collection of life drawing and all the different life drawing works that we did over the term. I felt that these worked really nicely as you can see my progress throughout with all of the different styles that I did, as I managed to get some quite detailed body drawings, and then obviously my favourite was this crowd drawing as it just looked like a variety of different people within a crowd of people. And then finally, this is the original of my first final piece. I felt that this worked really nicely as I was able to get some really good detail in with all of the different pencils that I used. And then for my second final piece, it is this mushroom study. I was able to get really good depth and tonal values as I followed the artist studies within my work. And then for my final piece, one thing I would improve on this would be moving the layout of the acetate, as I don't feel that I got it quite in the right place, and I feel that I could have improved it by adding a slight bit more detail and maybe a bigger border around the edge. Thank you very much.